Okay, as a libertarian candidate, let's talk about drugs. What do we do with drugs and alcohol in this country?
So I don't believe that I or anybody has the right to tell you to control what goes into or comes out of your body. And ironically, one of the points I make is when the abortion question inevitably comes up in debates. I say, look, the 14th Amendment does not confer jurisdiction on a fetus. It only we have birth rights. So the operative term there is birth. So this is a political conversation that politicians have used to raise money, but the government has no business in that. It has no business telling you what you can and can't put into your body. And as a libertarian and as someone who hit bottom in his 20s, far be it from me to prevent you from engaging in behavior where you hit bottom. Every great story, the protagonist has that moment in the film that we love where he or she hits bottom, and then we find out what that protagonist is made of. And we're happy when that person reinvents themselves. They finally find their pain point, and they make a change, and they emerge better for the adversity. So far be it from me to rob you of that opportunity.
So Mark gets in the White House. You obviously would legalize marijuana. What do you do with drugs like heroin and ecstasy and cocaine? Do you green light that?
Well, these drugs that have been demonized, the reason they were demonized was because there was an enormous business in it. In 1865, one of the Civil War amendments, the 13th Amendment, says that we shall not have slavery or indentured servitude in the United States, but, unless you happen to be duly convicted. So there's your mass incarceration right there. So today we live in a country where prisons are traded on the stock market, right? So people like Felicity Huffman own that stock, so they can take the profits and bribe their little piece of shit and put them into a fancy school, right?
Right.
But the people who are selling the drugs who end up in prison, it is known to the government that the people who are going to take that chance and risk a mandatory minimum sentence of 5, 10, or 20 years in federal prison are people who are at risk. And we know who is at risk. It's young black men. And we know who is the easiest to convict. It's young black men. And I had the opportunity to experience that. I lived with 900 people in a federal prison for 15 months, most of whom were young black men. And they were doing a lot more time than I was for doing a lot less than I did. And that system is by design. If you sit down and you want to create, if you're a private prison, all you need to do is buy Congress, which is very easy to do. They come cheap. You can buy them by the dozen. You go down and you buy Congress. You get them to pass a law that makes it illegal for people to do stuff that they're going to do anyway. And what that does is it drives the price up. It creates a black market. It creates criminal gangs. And that plays right into the hands of all the people who make money prosecuting, arresting, shaking people down. So it's been a big down. It's been a big negative for our country to have the war on drugs. So obviously, I'm completely opposed to it. And all of these drugs that are criminalized would be decriminalized, and that's just the end of it. There's no reason for it to be. There's no reason for this prohibition. It doesn't work. It makes the prohibition makes the problem worse from the viewpoint of the citizen. It makes it better from the viewpoint of the authoritarians who made these laws, who benefit from them together with their friends.
Don't you think, though, if I could go get some cocaine over at the liquor store, so to speak, don't you think the unintended consequences of the availability of all drugs? Man, I don't even know where you go get cocaine. I don't even know who you'd go buy it from. But if it was in the store and I could pick it up next to my my vodka, wouldn't that be a bad plan for the United States?
It's not a plan for the United States. It's a choice that the individual makes. And I would simply argue that the idea that you're going to impose your sensibilities on the choices that somebody makes with regard to substances that they may or may not ingest, and that there's some inherent goodness in that, I think that is inherently bad. I think that that if we don't have control over our bodies, then we don't have property rights at all in the United States. I think it all starts with our body. I think that, in fact, the conversation about cocaine would be non-existent relative to the sort of conversations we're having now. And
you don't think that availability though? I mean, it would be sitting in my house, and then my 8-year-old son, as he grows up and sees dad doing a line of cocaine, going, "Oh, that's good," and then dad's just not going to work as much because he's so tired from the night before because he stayed up all night. I don't know how you.
Yeah, I think that's an idea that has been assigned to us. There are certain drugs that have been prohibited now for 50 years, since the 70s. Nixon's chief of staff, H.R. Haldeman, who used to be an advertising guy, literally, wrote a memo to Nixon saying it's all about the blacks. This has always been racist from the beginning. It has created a new Jim Crow. It's created an institutionalized class of criminals. 1 in 3 black people have been to prison. And I can't think of any argument worse than that, than institutionalizing a system of slavery. I mean, if you look at the arc of slavery from 1865 to now, the Constitution was silent on slavery until the Civil War, and then it sanctioned slavery. So the upside is all we've done is move slavery from the private sector. It was an economic model in the private sector. Is now an economic model for the public sector with the prisons, and this is horrible. And I trust that people are going to teach their children what to do and what not to do. I trust that a lot more than I trust government. And I don't want to see people being sent to prison and having to go through their entire life with a felony conviction and all the collateral consequences of that because they were involved with some substance that was completely arbitrarily determined to be something you shouldn't ingest. Cocaine, I've never done cocaine. People who have done cocaine tell me it's amazing. And so if I'm Pfizer, I want cocaine to be illegal. I want it to be illegal. I don't want it to be cheap and available. I don't want to compete with cocaine. I don't want to compete with marijuana.
But then Pfizer would produce it. Why couldn't they?
Pfizer could then produce it. And they could. And it would be useful in a lot of medical situations if they did. Again, this idea that this is something that we should be focused on is especially when we're looking. You and I are both looking for ways to not spend money stupidly.
Right.
This is one of the ways we do it.
Didn't Portugal legalize or decriminalize most hard narcotics?
They've had real good luck with that. The other thing is how we're treated in a society because of the war on drugs. There are places in the South where, you don't want to drive through those places at night. The cops will pull you over. They'll shake you down for nothing. And you'll forfeit your car. If you happen to have, if you're traveling with $10,000 in cash, it's presumed that you're a drug dealer.
Right.
That's the country we live in. And so we all give up civil liberties for the war on drugs in ways that have just become normalized. There's nothing so messed up that it can't become normalized. I mean, the Trump administration, the Obama administration, they kidnap babies from refugees and asylum seekers at the southern border, and they put them in old shut down Walmarts. They lose the babies, and then the adults who are seeking asylum because they happen to live in Guatemala, which is perfect for growing drugs that rich Americans want. A lot of the drug dealers I was in prison with 30 years ago were from D.C. They were selling drugs up on Capitol Hill. They're selling drugs to dentists and doctors and accountants and lawyers. They're running their business like IBM, and they think they're good to go until one of these people gets in trouble with the feds and rats them out, and then they got to go to jail for 10 years for selling people drugs that they want to use. It's crazy.
Yeah, I just don't know how you would do that. And the only reason I say this I'm
not saying it's an easy sell. Not in this country.
No, I know you're not going to be able to sell it. I know that, but even if it was established that we would do this, if you just look at the harm, just say the drug of choice, alcohol, does to a country, I don't think introducing more substances that everyone would have availability to is going to be a good thing. So,
based on your argument, we should prohibit alcohol.
We should. But we're not. That's the that's the one we said that's fine, that we can do that one. Yeah.
Well, they actually there was a constitutional amendment making it possible, and then when it didn't work, they had to amend the Constitution again to prohibit the prohibition. So prohibition doesn't work. That's the bottom line. Even if it is a good idea, it doesn't work. If you were to prohibit firearms in the United States, it would just drive up the price of firearms.
But that's it. But that's in the Constitution, though. That's a different issue, though. It's a different issue.
So is selling alcohol in the Constitution now.
Yeah.
There's a constitutional amendment that makes it legal, just like the Second Amendment makes it legal to sell firearms. So it's just it's normalized to be able to own a firearm and drink. In fact, where I'm from in Vermont, you would do both at the same time. You get a 6-pack and a rifle and head up into the woods and hunt deer. And if you had a cousin you didn't like, you'd invite him to go along with you, and you'd shoot him during deer season. And say, "I thought he was a deer." Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's what happened with Dick Cheney, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he shot his lawyer in the face.